Welcome back, everybody. So as per the description, we are making a Chinook Hop IPA today, and this one will be a little bit different. I am going to use my homegrown hops. So for those of you that are new to home brewing, you don't want to use your homegrown hops for the bittering on this. So say the 60-minute addition. The reason is we don't know the beta and the alpha acids in our hops unless you send them out to get tested. So it is better to use pellets or something from your local homebrew supply store or get them online. This recipe is a tiny bit different, and as I always say, you should always take notes. Now, the last time I made this, it came out to 5.01 ABV or something like that, and it should be a little higher, so I actually used 11 pounds of 2-row. That is the Rahr 2-row. Then our town did get a homebrew shop, so I did go there to check out what they had, and I wanted to use grains from them to help them support the grand opening and all that. So they did not have the Cara 8 that I'm used to using, so I am looking at the recipe down below. CaraBelge, I think is how it is. I substituted that for the Cara 8. I just looked for something that was close to the same SRM and Levabond, and this one is 11.7 to 15.5, so it's around the same, and we'll talk about it when we get to the Vlorov. The color is a little bit different. Then 4 ounces of Caramel 120L. Now those are my pounds and ounces per my 5-gallon batches that I make. So if you wanted to make this at home, and I'll have it linked down below and on 31stbrewing.com, the 2-row would be 91.7% of the grain bill. The CaraBelge would be 6.3, and the 120L would be 2.1. Also, one thing that I did do, I wanted to see what my gallons or my water to ratio was for my mashing. So what I did was I took 1.33 times 12. So 1.33 is the amount, the quarts per gallon, and 12 pounds is the pounds of the grain that is going into this beer. So that came out to 16 quarts, so 4 gallons. So that's what I did. I heated up the 4 gallons, and then I'm transferring it on top of the grain. Now it is cold out. It was snowing, it was raining, so I did not pull my pump out. So what I did on this was I just heated up the 5 gallons, if you've been following me, because I do 5 gallons so that way I can take the temperature. And then I just put it up and let it run down into my mash tun. Then we'll stir it up. Beersmith does call for this to sit for an hour at 152 degrees. We were a little bit higher. I was actually surprised. Usually Beersmith calls for like a 168 to warm your water up to, and that way by the time you transfer it, it gets into the grains, it heats the grain up. You should be at about 152. I actually went up to about 172, 174, and I was still hot, and I let everything sit out, so that did surprise me. I guess I should just go with Beersmith. But again, my biggest fear is if that water or your mash in is too low of a temperature, you're going to have to add more water, a lot more, to get it back up. So I would rather throw some ice cubes in there and bring the temperature down than to have to heat up more water and make it a longer brew day. So on this one, I did hit 152.5. Again, what you should do if you're a little bit high, stir it, check it. If it's still high, if you're a couple points, throw in a couple ice cubes, stir those in there, and that should bring it down. But sometimes if you're a degree or two off, stirring it for a couple minutes will drop that temperature enough, and you should be fine. But like I said, on all these, I've kept it at 152. I think that's a good mash in for this beer. So once that hour is up, what we're going to do is floor off like normal. Now here's where I kind of wanted to talk about what I wanted to do different. So when I went to the local homebrew store, I got enough grains to make 2 of these. Now this one, as you guys do know, is going to be the Chinook. The next one is going to be Galaxy. But what I wanted to do, and I will post, or I will tell you what the efficiency is at the tasting. But what I wanted to do is actually use a pump after the mash out and recirculate it for about 15 minutes to see if I can get the beer clearer before it goes into the actual pot before boiling. Because right now I open it, I pour 2 or 3 of the jugs or the measuring thing that I use. I pour those off, then I go directly in. But I think I can get it clearer by using a pump. So that's one thing I want to try, and I think that might help with my efficiency a tiny bit, but we'll have to see. But as you guys are seeing, this is the floor off, and if you go back and watch one of my other videos, my latest one for my Chinook that I did in the summer, it was lighter. So I think the different malts did darken this beer up a little bit. I actually think it's closer to the first time I brewed this, the homebrew kit that I got from Northern Brewer, because I just used regular 2-row from Bell's, and this time I was able to get the Rahr from my local homebrew store, so that's what I used, and I think that color is a tiny bit off. But so after I did drain that, if I remember correctly, I got 3 gallons, I think, 2.5, 3 gallons, somewhere in there. What I did was, Beersmith said that I had to mash out with 3.84 gallons because I wanted to achieve 8.25 in the boil. Now, I know this is wrong because if I'm not over 8.5, I don't get 5.5 gallons going into the carboy. So for this mash out, I'm pretty sure I did 5 or 6 gallons. Heated that up to the 168. Poured that in there, stirred it up, and I did let it sit for 15 minutes. One thing I also might experiment with is on the mash out, just recirculating it. It doesn't matter about temp dropping, but just recirculate it for the 15 minutes to see if I can pull some extra sugars off or off the grains. But we'll have to see if I do it both times in the next one or if I just do it once. Obviously, our second runnings are going to be clearer because most of the sugars are going to be extracted in the first one. Now, as I was saying, 60-minute boil. Our first hop addition is 8 ounces of Chinook. If you go by the recipe, it does call for 0.75 ounces of Chinook, but in the last, I believe, 2 brew days that I've done on this, I've went with 1 ounce, and I could have taken the 0.5 ounces and put it in the dry hop, but I figured it's not really going to hurt it. Yes, is it going to give it more IBUs, but as I said, I've done it before, and I think the beer still comes out fine. Not too bitterness. You do get, I think in the last one, I did get some more citrus instead of spice, but the IBUs are not too high for this beer. So just to go back, our first runnings did come in at 1075 on this one, and our second runnings came in at 6 bricks, so that is fine. Our pre-boil gravity was 1040, and Beersmith called for it to be 1042. So even with 8.5 gallons of liquid or wort in my boil kettle, I was still 2 points off. So as you get learning your system and get brewing the same beer, you need to adjust them if you are not hitting your gravity. Now here's the fun part, adding my Chinook hops that have been vacuum sealed. If you've ever used your own, they do clump together a lot. They're sticky, at least mine are. And so what I'm going to do at, 10 minutes left in the boil, I added 6.5 ounces of dry hop. Now, when I do this, and I think for most people, it's usually a 5-to-1 ratio. So 5 ounces would equal 1 ounce of pellets. That's what I go with. Sometimes you can go up to 6. So what I did was I had my 5 ounces, and then I also found a ounce and a quarter Chinook hops I had from last year. Now, I do want to warn you, I would say you should make a smash beer with your hops, your own hops, before you use them in something else, just to find out what the flavor profile is. If your soil changes something, you want to find that out before you do this. So this is the first time I've used my Chinook. Because I've moved them 2 or 3 times, I really haven't had a yield that I could actually put in a beer. So that's what I would suggest. I didn't do that. I just took them out because I needed freezer space, or I want freezer space for next year. And so I went ahead and put them all in there. Now, as this is going, you will see it takes up a lot of room. I would say get a sack or something if you are going to do this, or if you have a hop blocker, just go ahead and throw them in, because you will see my sack, it actually fills them almost all the way up to the top, and a lot of them did not get in the wort. Now what I did was I pushed them down and I moved them around when the camera wasn't rolling, so that way they could get in there. Right now you're just looking for aroma and flavor, so it's not going to be a big deal if they're not down in there for that long. And what I'm hoping is, just with all that the flavors are going to be fine, but we will see on when we go ahead and drink this for the first time. But as you can see here, here's once I did get them all wet, just to get them in there and actually get them compacted down so I could put more of them in there, because like I said, if you're doing this, 5 ounces of dried hops is a lot compared to 5 ounces of pellets, and you're gonna need a bigger holder or something to put all those hops in if you don't have a hop blocker. I don't want this just floating in there, because at the end of the day, it will get stuck somewhere, and that's what I don't want. So after you get all these in there, our next addition is at 1 minute. So at 1 minute, instead of 0.5 ounces of dry hops, I used 5 ounces of leaf hops. Now, should I have done that? No, but again, how I separate my my homegrown hops is I either do 2, 3, or 5 ounce containers at a time, and I had a 5, so that's what it's going to get. Is it going to be too much? Maybe, but I don't think so. On a beer like this, I believe that the hop profile is going to go down pretty quick. So even if this is very bitter or very strong tasting at the beginning, if I let it sit 3-4 weeks, I'm guessing it will start mellowing out and it'll be fine. So here's what I'm talking about. Just get a bag, throw them all in there, then you can push that down, and then you should be fine. That way all that wort can get through there, and pull a lot of those flavors out of those hops. And also, it's good to use your hops. The fresher you can use them, the better. They will start losing some of their flavor, some of their bitterness. As I've been reading, the farther along, or the older they are. So just make sure, if you do grow your own, don't let them sit for like 5 years. Try and use them to the best of your ability, or give them away so other people can use them. So, and that is the hop schedule at the boil. After For dry hopping, we are going to use 1 ounce of pellet hops. Chinook, obviously this is an all Chinook beer, so we would use Chinook. Now, I know some people that do use their dry hop, or their dried hops for dry hopping. I don't like that, just because who knows what's in there. Is everything killed even though they've been in the freezer? I don't want to take the chance on that, so I'm not going to do that. And it's always turned out well using regular beers or regular hops, during dry hopping anyway, so that's what I'm going to use. So I had to restart the camera real quick because I only have 20 minutes on it. So as you can see here, this is letting some of the wort drain out of the bag. Now obviously, because you're using leaf hops, they are going to hold more liquid than you would see in a pellet hop. So you might want to hold them up, or if you have like a strainer, put it in there, then dump that liquid into your pot once the boil's over. I did start doing this before the boil was over because I knew it was going to take a while to drain that. And so, obviously, by shaking it, you're packing everything down. I didn't have gloves at this point, so I couldn't squeeze it to get that out. But really, the more you can get out of it, the better. If you do lose some, it's not that big of a deal, I don't think, when it comes down to it, because it's not like it's going to hold 5 gallons, but it is going to hold a lot. Those leaf hops are going to soak up a lot of that wort and hold them. So if you have a strainer or something, like I said, I would go ahead and put it in there, and then at the end of your boil, go ahead and dump that back in there. With the boil being over 212, it is going to sanitize it, and you shouldn't have an issue with something getting into your beer and making it bad. So if you guys watched my brew day on the Imperial Stout, what I did with that bag was I hung it over the side of the pot and clamped the bag, so that way I could let it drain, and I could start stirring in the DME that you got with that kit. And that's kind of what I did on this one, because remember, with 1 minute, right? 1 minute left in the boil, I did use a bag to put my dry hops in. And I was thinking, this is how I do it most of the time, and I was thinking this was going to work, but it didn't work out too well. Was usually I can grab the top of it and pull it over and clamp it, then let it cool off. But this one was so hot, I did have to go get my barbecue gloves to pull that up to get a hold of it. So if you don't have a pair of barbecue gloves, I would go ahead and get it, especially if you're doing extract batches with specialty grains. They might come in handy. But as you can see, because this floated on top, it did collect a lot of the protein, whatever else was floating in there. And again, like I said, if you go back and look at the bag before I put it in, how small it was and how big it is now, that's one thing to show you that those leaf hops will soak up a lot of your wort. So if you're if you're going to do a big dried hop, if you're going to put a lot of them in your beer, I would suggest adding an extra gallon or two of water, just because it is going to soak it up. I would hate to see somebody do a 5-gallon batch, and if their boil off was only, say, a gallon, and then they put 6 gallons, and at the end they had 4. Now, because I'm in Michigan and it snows in the winter, this is one way that I cool down my pot. Now, I don't have a outside spigot that I keep open, and obviously when it's snowing and below 32 degrees, I don't want to use my spigot, because the last thing I want is that water to freeze inside, and then I have a whole bunch of water in my house. So usually what I do is I will go around and make a pile of snow so I can put my pot in it. Now, if you're going to do this on your lawn, you're probably going to burn your lawn even though it's dormant. I did it on this one. I totally forgot. I thought it was sitting on snow, but that snow must have got so hot. And if I go out and look right now, I do have a dead ring of grass, which doesn't make me too happy. But you could do this on the cement also if you wanted to. And then what I do is just put the pot in there and move all the snow around it. Now, one thing, if you do have a ball valve on the end of your kettle, you might want to cover it. I did not. I usually just use Star Sand, spray it off, then I drain some, then I spray it again, because the snow will get up in there, and then that's the last thing you do want going into your brew pot or into your carboy is that snow. I'm sure you would get an infection if you did that. But yeah, just so move the snow. It's almost like a water bath, ice bath that some people do if you are in an apartment or something like that. I'll put the snow around there. I'll open the top and then keep stirring it. Then what I'll do after every minute or two is I will reset the snow, because obviously the outside of the pot's hot, so it is melting it. So you will get a gap around your pot. I push that in there, and then I stir it some more. Then I push it in there, I stir it some more. Then what I'll do is I'll push it in there, then I'll let it sit for about 5 minutes, then I'll keep doing that. Is it a lot more work? Yes, but as I said, I do not have a way to cool my wort down in the winter, because I cannot use my outside spigots. I do not have any in the house. I would have the washer one, but I'm not screwing with that. This is pretty much how I do it all winter, and it works. It does take some more time. Sometimes what I'll do is get it down under 100, and then I will transfer it to the carboy, and then I will wait until the next day to pitch the yeast. Some people say don't do it. I've never had it screw up a beer, but you have to do what you have to do. And you can do the no-chill method if you want to look that up and see how that's done. But as you can see, there is steam coming off this. I'm glad it stopped raining, because it was pouring when I was at my boil, and I was thinking I was really in trouble, because there was no way that I was going to be able to cool this down, and I was just going to have to put it in the fermenter and let it sit until it did reach the correct temp. So my original gravity is 1055. Beersmith called for it to be 1057, so I am 2 points under, just like on the pre-boil. Like I said, we will be dry hopping this one 3 days after fermentation starts. I will be doing a video on dry hopping beer, but you want to do it when fermentation is still active. Do not wait until day 5 or 6 when you don't see any bubbles. Dry hop your beers when there's still bubbles coming out. And so this is the last part of the video, transferring it in, and then you can pitch your yeast. So I thought I would save this to talk about at the tasting, but I will throw it in here just because it's the first time I've used it. The yeast for this is the Omega yeast OYL004. I've never used it before. I've always used White Labs, but we are going to try this. It did ferment fine. It's actually sitting on dry hops right now. So thank you for joining me on this video. If you like it, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell so you know when new videos are coming out. And until next time, happy brewing.